the National's webinar on live Q&A on the UAE salary guide for 2026. We're lucky to have someone who's in the business who will be talking to us about what we've been seeing online in terms of salaries for 2026, and to really answer our questions about what you want to know, especially when you're applying for a job, what the market is like out there. We have Slav Shakhov, the managing director of Cooper Fitch. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Salim. Good to be here.
I appreciate it. And I think this is something that obviously everyone living in the UAE wants to know. Why do millions of people from around the world move here? There's safety, there's good quality of life. But I think for a lot of us, it's also about one thing: work and earning a good salary. So when you're a job seeker here, you're mainly looking for answers to questions like which sectors are hiring most, what skills are in demand this year, and mainly what's a competitive salary today. So we're looking at data from the Michael Page UAE salary guide for 2026, which at the National we reported on, created charts to show like different industries and sectors and how they're doing. But we do have a lot of questions about the evolving job market in terms of what are the trends for 2026 when it comes to salaries and rate of hiring, which industries and sectors are hiring more or less. And then we're also talking about AI skills, right? We're seeing so many reports talking about like how is going to replace jobs, especially for entry-level people. So can you start us off by looking at 2026 and what is the theme that you're seeing when it comes to job hiring, when you're looking at job applicants? And and maybe also give a little intro about what it is that you do and why you're giving this context.
Thank you, Salim. Nice to meet everyone and welcome to the webinar. My name is Slav. I've been in the region for about 14 years now, 13 or 14 years, and I've been with Cooper Fitch for 10, mainly doing recruitment, executive search, and HR consultant, and that's across UAE, Saudi, and the wider GCC, right? I think we are in a very interesting time where we have a lot of headwinds, particularly from global economic factors. And then we have the region that's flourishing and growing, and everyone wants to be here and want to come here. And I'm not only talking about individuals, but corporates as well. That adds a layer of complexity. And not to say that it's negative. I think the sentiment is cautiously optimistic. For some sectors or skill sets, it's very optimistic, but there would be certain considerations throughout the year. If I wanted to put it, maybe I've read it somewhere recently. If you remember, after COVID, we had a great resignation time. I think we then moved to the great hesitation time. And what that simply means, it's not necessarily negative, but companies are more cautious or they take longer to make decisions, and they really try to recalibrate, particularly with AI coming into play.
Why are they taking longer to recalibrate then? Is it AI this year, or I mean, because there's so many factors from slower economic growth right now, the lowering value of the dollar, and that's affecting all businesses. I feel like everyone's tightening their purses, when it comes to spending. So that includes hiring. Like, what are you seeing as the key themes this year?
Yeah, I would say that the companies, they don't mind spending, but they would like to spend wisely. If you look at the broader region, there's a number of recalibration initiatives to kind of stop, pause, and see where the money should go next, and particularly just to what you mentioned, the global conditions and the global economic factors. So the hesitation doesn't come from a place where, oh, we don't want to invest money, but or develop. It's more of how do we make it more effective and efficient. And naturally, a big factor in this is AI. And I'm sure we'll talk about it today, but it does come into play these days for sure.
Right. And I just want to say that as we have people more and more joining the webinar, first of all, thank you for joining us and for this lunchtime live session. I want to say if you have questions that you would like to ask Slav, please put them in the chat box, the Q&A box, so that we can answer them, and I'll direct your questions to Slav. And also, if you're coming in later or at whatever stage, you can listen and watch to this discussion later on the Business Extra podcast, which is available at the National's website, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms. So back to our questions. When looking at skills, I think that's the thing that's on top of everyone's mind. Um, what are the most important skills? Are you seeing AI, for example, replacing a lot of the skills that we thought were the ones that we need, and then we have to develop new skills, or is it a bit of hype? Even though we're seeing the head of the IMF and other leaders of major business organizations saying that they will like AI will be eliminating a lot of those entry level functions and skills.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think there's a wide array of topics here, but if we want to talk about AI, we recently published an AI report, which is more tailored to the region. And the theme there and what we're seeing is that it's a merger of roles and not a loss of roles, so a merger of skills. So companies are adopting AI, and I think there was about 90% of respondents that were actually doing that. But only around 7% reported some kind of job loss. So at the moment is not that significant. I think only a third expecting some kind of job loss or cut in the next 12 to 24 months. But what it means is it does require new skills. The simple way of looking at it, and when you look at AI in the workplace, is when AI becomes your assistant, then agent, and then super agent. Assistant is when it supports you a little bit. Agent is when it replaces an automated task. And super agent is when it can actually replace a job. We're not fully there yet. The consensus is that it will happen, but we don't know to what extent and how. And I think that was one of the narratives in World Economic Forum as well, where, as you said, hype, is that sometimes commercially driven by hyperscalers and others? Potentially. The good news, I think it was McKinsey and World Economic Forum that said by 2030, we will lose 92 million jobs, but we will add 170 million jobs. So that's a 78 million gain. So I think on the overall, we're positive. However, we do need to upskill. And when you look into skills in general, continuous learning is something that's really on the radar, and that's by individuals and corporates. And I think that's very important. What we did see, maybe just a final point on that, is companies in GCC do not necessarily have formal training programs on AI. Only 29% of respondents did have something formal in place.
So you gave the number of more jobs will be created than eliminated, but it's hard for us to see that just yet. Like we're talking about years down the line, correct? We're not talking about in 2026 that those jobs will be eliminated, and then all of a sudden you have to have these skills that companies require. But as you said, the region hasn't really trained us for yet.
Yeah, I mean, this is again a prediction, and we've seen a number of more negative or positive reports, right? Goldman Sachs recently came with a report which was very optimistic about AI. Now, the numbers I give you is a prediction for 2030. So if we take that as more or less correct, it does mean that there's a period of adjustment that we need to go through. So again, continuous learning, being able to enable and adapt to AI and use AI in the workplace would be crucial skill. But I think as much as individuals need to be proactive and learn about it, it's up to employers to actually be clear about the AI strategy and how that will be employed and equip their people. I think that's what we're going to see over the next 2 to 3 years as a key theme in that domain, at least.
So to get our listeners prepared for this, I mean, what would you say are the AI skills that they need to learn to be employed that you're looking for as a recruiter?
It's a good question because we're still at the beginning of that curve. So at the moment, there's a lot of expectations and conversations, but it's not necessarily concrete, right?
That's the thing. I think like when people are looking at the skills, they don't know where to go. Is it right? Is it am I learning to do data analysis, or yeah, what is? I think that's a key question, right? And how would you say? Like, what would you tell career applicants, job applicants to do in this case?
Well, you kind of answered it for me a little bit. I think that's for sure as one key skill set is the data analysis, because as we evolve, and I'm sure you've seen it on the consumer level, everyone have used ChatGPT at least once, I hope.
Mm,
And working with that data and being able to process what's actually critical and what's true is very important. Maybe another example of consultant firms. We've seen recent reports last year where AI generated reports were actually not accepted by clients, such as governments and so on. And then consultant firms had to put more governance around it, meaning to
mm,
say there's a human being that regularly checks those reports before they go out to a client. So the ability to manage that and critically analyze that data and actually point AI in the right direction would be very critical.
yeah.
Because
Yeah, no, it sounds
the
like I
way,
think maybe develop. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, the way it works is, it's the quality of data input equals to quality output. So it will be still up to us human beings to feed AI the right level of data and
Mm.
accuracy and hygiene of it, right?
Definitely. And I think, I mean, what you're describing is like at least get the fundamentals down. Be aware everyone's learning about AI as you go along. We had done reports about companies not even knowing how to use it effectively. They're investing, a lot of money into it, but then when it comes to actual applications and ROI for those companies, they're still figuring it out. So maybe if you demonstrate, that you have insight, depth of knowledge, and that type of thing in whatever industry, yeah, that could be like a way just to stand out from the crowd, when you're applying somewhere. Um, so just going back to the basics of it again for 2026, we're seeing slower economic growth. We're seeing a lot of jobs, a lot of companies hire less in certain sectors. One, my first question for you is: are we seeing less jobs or lower salaries across industries as a result of this economic slowdown that's being reported, or is it irrelevant?
Um, I wouldn't say that overall there was a huge slowdown in the GCC. Of course, it's relative depending on the country, but if we're talking about UAE in general, we do publish our employment index. Last quarter, we've added 2.5%. We had 2.5% increase on jobs created in the UAE. Now, if you take that in the broader context, over the whole year, the trend was positive. Last year, it was even higher. So that means the volume of jobs keeps increasing. So it's actually not necessarily bad. I think the narrative in the UAE now is there enough jobs for the people coming in? And
Mhm.
that creates more competition that allows employers to offer lower salaries for the new entrants into their company. So not necessarily downgrade or reduce the salary of a current employee, but bring someone new on the lower level. And I think that's what's happening more and more so, just because the market is such. There's a good candidate supply, dependent, of course, on the skill set.
Mm. And I mean, are there certain sectors more than others that are hiring? Or, for example, the Michael Page report said that banking and finance was the place where you can get the highest salary, and maybe are hiring more as a result because there's a need for it. As we're seeing a lot of institutions, setting up, here in the UAE. Are there areas that you see more demand for when it comes to hiring or higher salaries for those types of positions?
Yeah, I would agree with Michael Page on that. I don't always agree with Michael Page in a healthy competition, but I would agree on that for sure. Although I think we just need to understand this one assumption that when we say banking and financial services is growing, it doesn't mean every organization in that sector is growing. It's still very contextual. Now, if we're talking about maybe sectors where I would be mostly optimistic in, it's banking and FS. In general, we've seen the increase in companies in the IFC and ADGM for that matter as well. There's a number of interesting segments within that, for example, crypto or fintech. So I would be very optimistic about financial services for this year. I would be very optimistic for the industrial sector. And
Okay.
that would be anything around manufacturing, energy, utilities. And it's actually very good to see the development of those sectors in the UAE as well. So I would say those are where I would see a lot of growth, or would hope at least. Tech sector.
Mm.
Interestingly enough, real estate, despite of all the report, I would be cautiously optimistic. I'm talking about from the job creation perspective, because what we see now is that there's a good amount of roles, but companies they're after a small talent pool. They're looking for specific niche skill sets, and some projects or some people here haven't gone through those cycles that they need them to. And looking at the press over the last week or two, it probably would be okay to assume that there would be some outflow of talent in real estate from Saudi Arabia. So that's why for the job seekers, I think there would be a bit of a competition. You still can expect healthy job growth in hospitality and tourism. I think that's a good sector here in general. Relatively optimistic in consumer. Would be fairly neutral about consultant, just because of what the industry has gone through. I'm talking about management consultant.
Okay, that's really interesting. And are you seeing that companies are adjusting salaries in response to inflation and rising living costs? Because you mentioned it was interesting about the real estate industry, right? Oversupply of, properties, but the same, predicted in the next few years. Same thing, the real estate, agents, and they're looking for a more specific talent pool. So, are we seeing, companies adjust accordingly?
It's a good question. I mean, you don't necessarily have a lot of companies that say, you know what, if inflation was 3%, we'll increase the salary by 3%. I think we've seen a modest growth last year of 1.6%, according to our data at least, or thereabout. Although we predicted around zero last year. So it's a good mistake, you can call it.
Mm,
Now, inflation does affect salaries, but not across the board. So it's not a blanket approach. It's all very contextual to a sector and a role. So we've seen, for example, that specialist roles or senior individual contributors actually have received a healthy increase last year between 5 to 9%. So
yeah.
very contextual. And we just need to know that the numbers we report in the open market are just gross monthly salaries.
Mm,
And there's a lot now done in the UAE on improving the pay mix. So there's bonuses, there's other benefits added on top.
mm.
And finally, I would like to say that I think UAE is still competitive globally.
Exactly. That's what I was reading as well. I mean, especially since there's a lot of innovation taking place here and a lot of things happening. See, at least the growth rate is, of these types of jobs is higher than, for example, the U.S. jobs report, that was shared earlier. So, but going back to the salaries in companies, but whether for inflation or not, are we finding that salaries are increasing or decreasing in 2026 for the region or globally?
We are predicting a modest growth.
Modest
I-
growth. Okay.
yeah,
That's
but
good to hear.
again, we're talking about the weighted average across the market, and that's
Mhm.
around 2%. I think it's just under 2%.
Okay.
Is our forecast. Hopefully we're wrong and it's higher, but
Mm.
this is weighted average. Would certain skill sets get higher packages? What I've seen recently in financial services and around quantitative data skill set, absolutely.
Mm. So as we
So it's
said before
somewhere
about the
around
AI
here.
skills, like if you're developing those soft skills or skills that are needed for jobs that don't exist yet because we don't know what they are. Yeah, people are willing to pay higher for that.
And
Um,
there's a global competition for those skills. Maybe in 5 years
Definitely.
it wouldn't be as such, and there would be less premiums. But at the moment,
Mm.
that's obviously a hot skill.
And how does you mentioned how the UAE region compares globally, but how does the UAE compare to other countries in the Gulf when it comes to hiring, the amount of hiring, the type of person they're hiring. Again, just to see, like, for example, someone's looking for a job in the region, where should they be looking?
Um, well, I guess given the size of economies and just historical dynamic, you would always look at UAE and Saudi first, and then not to say that other countries are not attractive, but that's just historically would be the top two. I think UAE has put itself in a very strong position because you could maybe call it a steady growth. where it's not just run, stop, run kind of situation. So overall, quite optimistic. But again, I think we are expecting more residents.
Mm.
We are expecting more companies coming in. So that's overall healthy. Would that drive the competition for the job market and candidates? Yes.
And as you mentioned that companies are looking for high-skilled applicants, with the skills of the future. Are as some of the stories we'd seen as well of reports from companies are saying they're going to eliminate jobs and then retrain their own employees, to develop those skills. Are you seeing that companies are doing a good job of retraining? And just looking at this report, I saw as AI wipes out desk jobs. Citigroup CEO Jane Fraser says the company is training 175 thousand employees to reinvent themselves before their roles change forever. Are you seeing other companies do this? So for this would be more for people in jobs already. Are you seeing them getting upskilled by their companies, or is it something that you normally have to do yourself?
Well, according to our AI report, only 29% of respondents had formal training programs. So that
Yeah,
is not enough, as we can see. And
definitely, especially now.
it's, like we said, right? I think it's a bit of both. Um, Employees would need to stay competitive and kind of think of contingency planning. But I do think that trend will increase, to be honest. And when we look at large revolutions or technological changes, there's a lot of good examples globally of how companies retrain their employees. There's one I heard at the conference recently. BMW retrained some of their factory workers into data engineers, and we're talking about hundreds of jobs. So what they
Oh,
got
interesting.
then is hundreds of people that know their product, know their company. They don't need to fire them because no one likes it and it's costly, and they just fill those new roles.
Yeah,
Um,
identifying transferable skills that you can train to fill those jobs that they need. Definitely,
I
definitely. I see that.
hope and I think it will happen. To what extent that will happen, we'll see. But just to note as well, and I know everyone is talking about AI, the human part of the job is becoming more and more in demand. So
Yeah.
when you look at some of our recent reports and globally, soft skills are required even more so. I know it's always been a big factor, but now it's increasing.
Definitely, definitely.
Things like emotional intelligence, being able to work under stress, particularly in the world where we live among data and there's a lot of data. It's being able to have that sound judgment and see the critical path is very important.
I have so many questions from our listeners and viewers, so I'm going to go through them. If you can, yeah, let's if you can give like one sentence answers for them, because just to be able to get through them all. But for example, like we mentioned AI skills, so we received one question via email. But is it essential to have AI skills in a CV, even if the industry has yet to adopt AI workflows in the day to day, even where there is potential for? So as we said, right, those skills aren't defined yet. But for example, how would you show that within your resume or CV so that it pops out that you actually understand AI, and also maybe versus someone who just puts, some colorful AI language, AI skills, and, without the experience to back it up?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Be authentic, so don't overdress it. But if you did do a certain course or you worked on a pilot project or any sort of involvement, I think it's important you add it to your CV.
Mm.
And let's not forget that these days, companies more increasingly more looking into ATS and automated filtering systems. So it is sometimes unfortunately, sometimes fortunately about keywords. So it is about actually understanding what the role is and making it tailored and more relevant for sure.
It follows actually exactly to our next emailed question about, is
Mhm.
ATS used in the entire hiring shortlisting process? So is that the first filter that you should prioritize that before everything else? And then has the CV lost its importance as a result?
So it really depends on the company. I know a certain example of a large organization in the UAE where the recruitment process is fully automated to the point of final interview. So you only get a human interaction at final interview stage, and this is for admin or front office kind of roles. So of course, then ATS or systems become very important, whereas other organizations don't use it as such. And for niche roles, they use recruiters like us, where it's our job also to be able to present the roles. Has CV lost its value? I don't think so.
Yeah, to me, for the entry level roles, the more general jobs out there, that will work because they're looking for skills. But then, correct, like if you're looking for a salesperson who has networks and that type of thing, you need, right, to get to know the person, know their character, and how they deal with people. Mm.
Yeah.
And this is a question for the UAE. Is there a maximum gratuity amount that a company will pay out even for long service?
Yes, I think there is. I think you can easily Google it, but from on top of my head, I think you get one basic salary for every year of service, starting from 5 years of employment. But what I would encourage to look into is the new end of service schemes that came into the market, where it's not mandatory yet, but some employers can opt for effectively a pension fund where they can transfer your end of service into a pension fund, and then the money can be invested on your behalf. So you have control, you can contribute more money into it, and you can choose your risk profile. So there's a number of companies in the EU that do that, in the UE, sorry. And I think that's a really good competitive advantage of the local market. And I think that's also a good play for companies to retain employees and make it more attractive for them.
Definitely. Yeah, that's actually something I want to expand on in terms of retaining good talent and capable talent. I think is one of the most difficult things to do here in the region, not just in the UAE. So once you bring someone, if they're from abroad or finding them locally, and then incentivizing them to stay, do you find that companies are doing that enough? What are they doing, or are they just not doing it at all?
They're doing way more. We don't just publish the open data salary guides, but we do a lot of work on tailored salary benchmarkings and comp and bend system designs for organizations, and things like flexible working from home, a number of annual leave days are all coming into play. Interestingly, a trend last year, not necessarily a major one, but it did come up. Employees want an increased percentage of basic towards their gross, which will then affect your end of service benefit.
Mm.
So no, there's quite a lot to being done, or at least there's a good direction of travel. There's training programs. There's increasingly more focus on long-term incentive plans where an employee would get potentially a large sum of bonus based on performance of them, a company or unit or whatever fund, but that's in the period of 3 to 5 years. So that's a
Yeah.
good motivation, but that's also retention too.
And but are companies actually doing that then? For example, if I think younger generations entering the workforce are more bold about asking for what they want and what they're willing to do, saying this is in my job requirement, or I expect, as you said, a higher base salary pay, instead of dividing it up, between transport, accommodation, that type of thing. So I guess two questions, because one, are companies actually being receptive to this? I mean, you mentioned that they are adjusting some things, but I mean, as they're tightening the belt, are they actually offering more in terms of benefits, like say longer, more vacation days, just shifting things around? And then the second is that Michael Page had identified that 49% of employees in the UAE have tried to negotiate their salaries, and I guess I'm wondering how successful have you found that approach? And if they haven't been successful, what do you think is the right thing to do? I threw a lot at you, but basically the idea is about negotiating salaries, and are companies responding to applicants or current employees who want to renegotiate?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. You mentioned the generational problem. I think the Gen Z is a dilemma that everyone needs to reconcile, and there's nothing negative about it.
You
It's
said it,
more
I didn't.
no, no, no. It's not. It's not a dilemma. Doesn't mean bad, right? But it does need
Mm,
some kind of equilibrium because you're
yeah,
right.
exactly. There are a lot of skills actually that older, like my generation, needs to learn from them about asking for what you want, which is actually very critical, I think.
I was just about to say that I think there's a lot to learn, and hopefully we will find an equilibrium where we meet in the middle. And I mean, we probably have no choice, but we will find one, right?
Mm.
When it comes to negotiating salaries and the 49% what Michael Page has posted, well, there's a number of factors. So there's a lot of research showing that after COVID, let's call it after COVID world, people that were more often in the office had a higher chance of promotion.
Mm.
And now we're talking about, so let's say it's just given, right? Sometimes, a lot of times, that's how it works. And now we're given more remote work or work from home or flexible working arrangements. So I think back to the negotiation, be visible. It doesn't mean, I think there's enough proof to show that you don't need to be in the office 5 days a week to be effective, but
Mm.
your impact and what you're doing at work and the value you provide, it needs to be visible and needs to be heard, right?
I see what you mean. It's like not being necessarily physically present all the time, especially as it like traffic is getting high. Like if you're saving more time from being at home to get the job done, that's
Absolutely.
fine, right? But then show your participation, show your willingness in different ways. If being at home is what's the thing that you need, at the time being, and yeah, like take initiative, all that kind of thing. Yeah, so there are different ways to be present. It seems like in the post-COVID era.
So that's exactly what I mean, right?
Mm.
Because we, for example, have remote work policy and work from home policy, and some of the top performers may not be in the office 24/7 or 5 days a week. So it is about results, but it is about generating that value. So to increase your confidence in negotiation, I think being prepared and show what you've done and actually drive value at work is very important.
Mm.
Again, back to soft skills here, emotional intelligence and the way you communicate at work is very, very important because
Yeah.
it's a different type of negotiation where you come in and demand, or when you're reasonable and you come with facts. So I think that would be my answer to that.
Another thing I'm seeing with younger people from younger generations is that they want to maintain their independence when working for a company. So a lot of people, they come in with their own following, as being an influencer and either looking at their product or their own business, and they want to not necessarily be hired as an employee that just has to push the company line and that's it. But they want things to allow them freedoms, allow them to do things on the side. Like was it micro retiring? People want to have different forms of income coming in and not just rely on one job. Is is that model adapting to the current environment? I mean, are companies willing to do that, or is it only maybe newer companies and not the traditional McKinsey's and other companies like that out there?
So I like that idea in general. I think that's intriguing, and there's a lot in that. And when you look globally, there's something that's on the rise, which is interim management, is where when you can hire your fractional CFO for 2 days a week, you
Mm.
don't need to pay full salary, but you get value, and that individual could be based remotely or be with you 2 days a week or work elsewhere. I think that is on the rise. I think we will see more of that in the region. The considerations there are, for example, it might be a bit easier in Europe due to the work permits arrangement and visa. But we have seen improvements in the UAE. There's freelance visa, there's golden visa, and so on. And sorry, just something came to mind. Interestingly, I don't know if you've seen the new announcement in Abu Dhabi starting this year on the merit-based promotions.
Oh
Es-
yes.
Essentially, that accelerates results-driven or value-driven promotions and not necessarily
Mhm.
staying in
That's a good
role
point.
for 2, 3 years. So we are making good progress there.
Mm. I see, like, the early steps are there and, implementing, yeah, like, because it needs to change the system, though, right? So this has a performance-based, uh, you know, promotional aspect versus just being in a company and, punching in and punching out as it used to be more, in terms of, yeah, getting your salary. So it could be, if you have more freedom, you also have to deliver more, be rated on your deliverance versus your attendance, which is, yeah, probably the way the jobs will adapt to the future.
And
Um
Chinese would like that a lot, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Because it gives them
There's
the
more
freedom to do
freedom.
what they want, but at the same time, it benefits the company because as long as they're getting, their KPIs are being met, for example, or whatever the agreement is, with that flexible, uh, you know, type of job, then everyone's happy. So yeah, you're right. I think they would be, happy about that, and it's good to hear we're going that direction. I need to learn how to think like that more myself. One thing we're getting again in this more remote, globalized, environment that we're in, and also we're in the UAE, so where millions have come, to work here, but also have kind of one foot in one world and one in the other. Um, how is it different looking for a job internationally? I'm kind of wondering about like the what passport you hold, where you're actually based, what your background is. What are these variants of particularly being abroad and not from the area? How does that affect your job success? Like, will companies say that they have experience from abroad and we're looking for the international experience, so we're more keen to hire someone like that, or are they looking for someone who is familiar with the local environment and would be more likely to hire that person instead of someone from abroad? What is there? Yeah, is there one that stands out more than the other? Is preferable by companies?
Remember, you told me to give one sentence answer to every question, and I feel
The question was like a real. Yeah, sorry, that was a three,
like
4, and 1.
I'll try to be short and punchy with this, but it's a bit of
Mm,
both. It's twofold.
okay,
One,
okay.
there is an increase in value of people with local experience. I'll give one example. You talk about governance, risk, compliance roles, which are important now in financial services, but also in industry. Knowing local regulations potentially would reduce the risk of operating, but onboarding, training the individual, and so on. So, of course, there is an increase in value of that. At the same time, UE has always been welcoming a lot of expats that bring value, and I think that will continue to happen, especially as we create more jobs and there's more companies coming in.
Mm,
And to add to that, there are certain skill sets that may not be in abundance here just yet. So we talk about AI or certain kind of niche sectors and so on. So it's a bit of both, right? So it's okay. It's the market is obviously open to overseas talent, but context matters.
okay. And then just looking generally as well, if there's one thing that you had to identify that job applicants were doing right, and then also one thing that they were doing wrong, what would you say that is from what you've seen?
Uh, the
Try to keep it
big,
short this time. So,
that's okay. So being right, I think it's them being relevant and being timely when they apply for jobs,
Mm,
in the sense of they actually look at the job description, they see the relevance, and they articulate that, and they do it at the right time or to the right individual,
mm,
be it through a recruitment firm or job ad or networking LinkedIn with the hiring manager. What happens in the wrong way, and it's my personal opinion, what we're seeing in the GCC region, which is unlike in others, we
mm.
have people applying for jobs for which they're not necessarily relevant. So when you look at LinkedIn, you might want to apply for a role and you see that there's 2,000 applicants. So that's a bit wrong, right? It's very difficult for the company to filter through all of them. And also, if you only 40% fit, well, your effort is probably spent better elsewhere.
Yeah,
That's, I guess, what
being
can.
able to identify that. Okay, and yeah, like you brought up an interesting point about being particularly in the GCC, you have to apply differently. What are the things that stand out to you as like what you need to do different than when applying in other parts of the world?
Well, I think the job ad,
The
definitely.
way to no, okay.
I think we're still seeing that the average time to hire in the GCC is longer than in other markets. And it's not necessarily good or bad, but it's just a fact. So
Mm,
being a bit more patient here and strategic um, is important. Having said that, there's been big improvements on that cycle. But again, on average, I would say it's still not the same as in Europe, North America, or Asia Pac. So being
yeah.
patient with the process is important and being strategic about it, speaking to as many relevant people as possible.
This happens to me a lot on LinkedIn. And actually, I'm wondering now if LinkedIn is the only platform that people should be reaching out on, because I've had also some people reach out on Instagram. But like reaching out to the hiring manager, looking up who the hiring manager is, that type of thing, is that a good approach, particularly in the region where relationships really matter?
Not on Instagram. I would not recommend doing that, but I don't
The
see
platform matters. Okay. Yeah.
But I don't see anything wrong with that on LinkedIn. In
Mm,
fact, now LinkedIn has this feature where you apply for the job and it says meet the hiring team. So I'd say
yeah.
that's a bit of an encouragement, right?
Mm,
And who knows, you might stand out, right? Companies have different policies for how they review applicants, but sometimes that could work for sure.
definitely. Okay. And we have a few questions about specific industries. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I think one important one is IT. Because it's something one of the industries that are really adapting. Uh, and so, if I plan to relocate with my years of experience in automation, what should my expectations in terms of a package be? That's a bit specific, but I mean, like even looking at traditional industries like IT, I guess the question is, yeah, like what should I be prepared with, and then what can I expect in terms of these traditional roles that are intact, but then are also evolving.
The market is buoyant. I think there's growth and there are opportunities. You need to be prepared for a lot of competition locally and globally because there's a lot of interest. I'm looking at our Gulf Employment Index. So Q4, software roles decline of 1%, cyber 3% increase, digital data and AI 4% increase, cloud flat. But that's in the context of a quarter. In general, I'd say it's fairly healthy. Salary, it honestly really depends on what skill sets you bring to the table, what role, organization, all those matter. So that would be hard to answer right now without having much
Yeah.
background.
And given that a lot of people are applying from abroad, that want to move to the region, what is your best advice for someone to be competitive applying from abroad, and even how to do it? Is it just LinkedIn, uh, or yeah? How should an overseas person apply for a job in the UAE or GCC?
I would try to learn about the region as much as possible. And that comes from speaking to people you might know here, network, and understand how the job market works. What were the challenges or positive points they went through when they were looking for a job? And then it's probably a lot of things we already mentioned, right? Be visible on LinkedIn, be relevant, not a good idea to post ChatGPT posts every day because that's what we see on LinkedIn a lot. And if you are actually authentic and organic that way, I think you will already stand out. Try to network as much as possible because people that might be in the same industry or same profession could point you in the right direction, and that works. Apply to different jobs, LinkedIn, job boards, network with recruitment firms. I think they are a good source
It's interesting. Okay.
knowledge and potential job opportunities because, I mean, Cooper Fitch would rarely post any job adverts, right? So that
Mm,
means that, but we are working on a lot of jobs. So they're not in the open market. And speaking to people like us is important. It's
you
just
could
also,
personalize the recommendation when you get to know someone for a job, and it seems like that's what's needed more and more. As you said, some jobs will have 2,000 applicants. How do you stand out? It's someone that identifies, oh, this person has this and that, so I could assist. Okay.
well, we will only send, say, five and in a short list, but
Mhm.
those would be tailored to a specific job without commentary or why they're relevant. So there's a higher chance they would be looked at.
Yeah, filtering through exactly, and asking someone else to do it. And this one is a good one, I think. Again, talking about traditional versus modern. Uh, I guess skills and education, because I have an uncle, for example, only determines someone as intelligent and educated if they have a PhD. But when we're talking about upskilling with AI, are PhDs particularly in demand for most jobs, or for example, like AI skills? I don't think there are PhDs available yet for many of the AI skills that are needed in today's world. But would a employer hire if you did have something that had AI in the title of your doctorate?
You would be surprised. There's a lot of new, because PhD is research driven, right? And sometimes it is AI.
Some
Look,
that have the name on it, but I mean, they don't even. No one really knows. That's the thing as
it's
well.
very new. It's
Yeah.
very new. In the context of today's usage of AI. Now, I did see certain roles that do need PhD
Mm.
in the UE, but they are highly specific. So we're talking about quantitative analysis, investment, data analytics. So PhD is quite valued there. But is that a general trend in the market? I wouldn't say so, particularly for something that's quite niche.
the way that people are learning and getting skills nowadays is like, they'll. I'm forgetting the name of the online platform now, but basically, like you can just learn skills, from there, and then add it to your LinkedIn. For example, say, oh, I learned this particular data analysis, or I learned, how to scrape, information from files, and like, is that? Are you finding that is standing out more than getting a separate degree, which can take a longer time and more money?
In the context of the job, degree would be important because it's
Mm,
a bit longer, more structured, but those courses I would say are quite useful. The question is, how did you apply it in your workplace? And have you
mm,
shown that in your CV as an achievement? Because then that's a conversation opener. After you got the interview, then it's less about the CV, but it's more about you.
okay.
So then the soft skills are important again.
No, yeah, that makes sense. So basically, they have to be relevant, whether that's a long, term degree or a particular skill, but both have to be applicable. Otherwise, companies won't see it as useful. I think we've gone on for a bit, so I'll just end with your final thoughts about what advice would you give to job applicants, in 2026, or what have you been noticing over the years that they should be doing and are not?
I think it's relevancy, proactiveness, right communication approach, and continuous learning. I think that combination is very, very important. We've underscored the importance today of soft skills. There's a wide array of those. And then being able to be topical and relevant to today's workplace will be very important. And at least based on the reports that we're hearing and all the research about, it seems positive. There will be more jobs than the jobs we lose. But who is going to transition and how it's going to look like is something we need to be thinking about. But it's probably not as scary as we think.
Like 2026 is hopeful because I think a lot of people that have reached out like, oh, it's so hard to find a job nowadays, and the economy is getting worse, jobs are changing, and we don't even know what they want anymore. But would you say that it's getting harder or easier this year?
Based on the kind of signals I received from clients in the market in 2026, I'm quite positive.
Good to
Um,
hear.
but it's hard to generalize, right? It depends on the sector, it depends on the skill set.
Great. Thank you so much. And we were supposed to have more guests, but I think, Slav, you've done a wonderful job of answering the questions from every angle. So I really appreciate your time. And everyone, thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, this is one conversation. I'm sure, they have many more questions, and we can always, reach out with our responses, doing the due diligence. Reach out to audience@thenationalnews.com. And yeah, just wanted to know that outside of this live recording, again, this will be on Business Extra, which is the business podcast, and it's available at the National's website, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms. I'm Sunny Masai, the business editor at The National, and we've been speaking to Slav Shakhov, the managing partner at Cooper Fitch. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone.